Maybe you've been measuring your life against the wrong part of the story. Maybe you've been looking at chapter 1, seeing confusion, delay, awkwardness, loneliness, and thinking, something must be wrong with me. But no good story gives away the whole character in the opening scene. The first chapter is usually messy. The hero doesn't understand the map yet. The world feels too loud. The signs don't make sense. They're not powerful yet. They're not polished yet. They're just becoming. And maybe that's what nobody told you. Some people are built for quick beginnings. They fit early. They move fast. They know how to speak the language of the world before they even know who they are. They chase the obvious trophies, get the applause, pick the path, wear the role. And everyone says, look, they're doing so well. Meanwhile, you're standing there with this strange heaviness inside you, wondering why life feels like a door everyone else can open except you. But maybe your soul was never interested in a cheap entrance. Maybe something in you refused to rush into a life that didn't feel true. Not because you were lazy, not because you were broken, not because you lacked ambition. Maybe you were simply not willing to become a copy of someone else, just so the world could call you successful early. And honestly, that kind of delay hurts. It can feel embarrassing. It can feel like watching a train leave the station while you're still trying to understand where you even want to go. But sometimes, missing the wrong train is the first act of grace. There's a quiet kind of person who doesn't bloom in the places everyone expects. In school, they may seem distracted, too intense, too inward, too sensitive, or just hard to place. In work, they may struggle with environments where performance matters more than truth. In relationships, they may feel like they're always carrying more depth than the room knows what to do with. And because the world loves speed, it often mistakes depth for delay. It sees someone thinking deeply and calls it overthinking. It sees someone refusing false paths and calls it fear. It sees someone searching for meaning and calls it confusion. But imagine a tree for a moment, not the kind planted for decoration, trimmed every season to look acceptable. Imagine an old tree in the making. For years, nothing dramatic happens above the soil. No impressive branches, no huge shadow, no fruit yet. Just roots. Quiet, hidden roots. If you didn't understand nature, you'd say the tree was failing. You'd say, why isn't it growing like the others? But beneath the surface, it's preparing to survive storms that would tear shallow roots from the earth. Some lives work like that. The visible part comes late because the invisible part had to become strong first. A lot of people build a life before they build a self. They choose what looks good, what sounds right, what earns approval, what makes their parents relax, what impresses strangers, what photographs well. And for a while, it works. The costume fits enough to get through the day. The title looks clean. The relationship looks stable. The schedule looks responsible. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice starts tapping on the wall, not screaming, just tapping. Is this really yours? That question can be avoided for years, but it doesn't disappear. It waits, patiently, like a debt with no deadline but a perfect memory. You, however, may have been forced to hear that question earlier. Maybe you couldn't fake excitement for things that didn't move your spirit. Maybe you couldn't stay in rooms where your nervous system felt like it was shrinking. Maybe you walked away from paths that would have made sense on paper, but felt dead in your body. And because you didn't have the perfect explanation yet, people misunderstood you. They thought you were wasting time. They thought you were difficult. They thought you were too picky, too quiet, too dramatic, too deep. But sometimes, the part of you that looks difficult is just the part that refuses to betray your future. So those years that looked empty weren't empty. They were sorting years, filtering years, burning off years, years where life was stripping away borrowed desires, fake urgency, inherited dreams, and all those little identities you almost wore just to be accepted. It's not pretty work. Nobody claps when you're learning what isn't yours. Nobody throws a celebration because you didn't force yourself into the wrong life. But something sacred happens in that hidden place. You begin to know the difference between wanting something because it's true and wanting something because it would make you look less behind. At some point, usually when everyone else seems to be moving on, the comparison gets loud. Friends start building careers, people get married, someone buys a house, someone launches a business. Someone seems to become exactly who they said they would become at 17, which is always a little suspicious, but still, it stings. You scroll, you watch, you smile politely, and then you sit alone with that old question. Why am I still here? Not physically here, spiritually here, in the waiting room, in the fog, in the place between no longer being who you were and not yet knowing who you're becoming. That season can break a person if they misunderstand it, because from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. No clear progress, no obvious reward, no clean storyline, just detours, silence, starting over, losing motivation, gaining it back, doubting yourself, finding a spark, losing it again. It's messy. Real growth usually is. People love transformation after it becomes aesthetic. They love the butterfly, the comeback, the calm person with wise eyes. But nobody wants to talk about the cocoon being dark, cramped, and honestly kind of ugly. Nobody wants to talk about how becoming yourself can feel like losing your mind for a while. Yet falling behind has a strange gift hidden inside it. It gives you time to see through the game. When you're not winning the same race as everyone else, you start noticing the race itself. You notice how many people are chasing things they don't even enjoy. You notice how much of adulthood is performance dressed up as responsibility. You notice how approval can become a leash. And once you see it, you can't fully unsee it. That's painful, yes, but it's also freedom knocking, even if at first it sounds like loneliness. Loneliness plays a bigger role in this story than most people admit. Not the dramatic kind, where someone stands in the rain looking out a window. The ordinary kind, being in a group and still feeling far away, having conversations but feeling like only the surface of you showed up, laughing at the right moments while some deeper part of you sits quietly in the corner, untouched. That kind of loneliness can make you wonder if you're too much or not enough. Maybe both, depending on the day. But slowly, if you don't numb it, if you don't run from it too quickly, loneliness teaches you how to belong to yourself. And once you begin belonging to yourself, something shifts. Not all at once, no lightning bolt, no grand music, more like a room inside you finally stops shaking. You stop needing every person to understand you. You stop explaining your soul to people who only came to inspect your costume. You stop begging timelines to bless you. A different kind of strength begins to form, quiet and almost inconvenient. You realize you don't want a life that merely looks successful. You want one that feels internally clean, one where your yes is honest and your no doesn't require a courtroom defense. A person who has spent years facing their own confusion doesn't become shallow overnight. Something gets forged in those private battles. You meet envy, not as a villain, but as a messenger showing you where you still feel unlived. You meet fear, not as an enemy, but as a guard standing outside doors you may eventually need to open. You meet anger, grief, insecurity, shame, and all the strange little shadows people usually hide under productivity. And instead of pretending they're not there, you begin to listen, not obey. Listen, there's a difference. A small parable fits here. A young sculptor once complained that the stone he was given was too rough, too uneven, too full of cracks. An older sculptor laughed and said, "Good, smooth stone teaches you nothing." Life can be like that. The parts you thought disqualified, you may become the exact places where your depth enters. The rejection that made you quieter may have taught you discernment. The delays that humiliated you may have protected you from building a whole life around someone else's idea of success. The loneliness that felt like punishment may have cleared enough space for your real voice to finally speak. Eventually, you stop trying to become impressive. That's when you become dangerous in the best way. Not dangerous because you harm people. Dangerous because you're harder to control. Praise doesn't intoxicate you like it used to. Criticism doesn't destroy you like it once did. Rewards don't make you betray yourself so easily. Fear doesn't rush you into cheap decisions. You become, in a sense, unbribable, and people feel that. Some are drawn to it because it gives them permission to be more real. Others may resent it because your freedom quietly exposes the cages they still decorate. Visibility can feel strange when it finally arrives. After years of being overlooked, you may hesitate when life asks you to step forward. There's still a memory in the body of being misunderstood, laughed at, dismissed, or treated like you were too slow to matter. So when the door opens, you may stand there for a second, wondering if it's a trick. But a later chapter requires a different kind of courage than the first one. Early courage is surviving not being seen. Later courage is allowing yourself to be seen without shrinking back into the old wound. Now the momentum begins, but it doesn't look frantic. You're not sprinting anymore. You're moving with weight. Your decisions become cleaner. Your relationships become fewer, but richer. You stop chasing intensity and start seeking peace that doesn't feel empty. You stop trying to be understood by everyone and start recognizing the rare people who can meet you without needing you to become smaller. Even your ambition changes. It becomes less noisy, more precise. Less look at me, and more, let's build something that actually matters. That's a completely different energy. A beautiful thing happens when your past finally starts making sense. Not because every painful thing becomes good. Some things were simply hard. Some people should have been kinder. Some doors closed in ways that left marks. No need to pretend otherwise. But when you stop dragging the past like a punishment and start reading it like a map, energy returns to you. The years you called wasted begin to reveal what they were protecting. The failures that embarrassed you begin to show what they refined. Even the silence, the waiting, the detours, the strange pauses, suddenly they're not random scraps anymore. They become chapters. Bitterness is often the final trap before emergence. It whispers, "You lost too much time." It points at everyone who got there earlier and tells you to make your heart hard. But bitterness is a poor architect. It can build walls, sure, but it can't build a life. If you let resentment become your identity, the past wins twice. Once when it hurt you, and again when it convinces you to stop becoming. So the work now is not to deny what happened. The work is to refuse to let delay turn into poison. You take the old pain, not gently at first maybe, and you place it into the furnace of meaning. There's an old saying often attributed to ancient wisdom traditions. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. But life has a more hidden version of that. When the self is ready, the path appears. Not before. Before that, the path would have become another costume, another performance, another impressive prison. The opportunity that fits you now may not have fit the earlier version of you. The relationship you can hold now may have overwhelmed you then. The responsibility you're ready for now may have crushed the person you used to be. Timing isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's mercy wearing a terrible disguise. As the later chapters unfold, you may notice that your presence does more than your performance ever did. People listen differently, not because you speak the loudest, but because your words come from somewhere lived in. You don't need to dominate the room. You don't need to prove your intelligence every 5 minutes. You've done too much inner work to waste energy on theater, and that kind of groundedness reorganizes the space around you. People may not even know why they feel calmer near you, why they trust you, why your silence says more than someone else's speech. But they feel it. So maybe the main character doesn't peak in chapter 1, because chapter 1 was never about peaking. It was about surviving the wrong mirrors. It was about learning the difference between attention and alignment. It was about feeling out of place long enough to stop begging every place to approve of you. Later success doesn't consume you the way early success often does, because by the time it arrives, you've already learned who you are without it. You can receive it without worshipping it. You can lose parts of it without losing yourself. Now, if you felt late, please hear this carefully. Late compared to what? A timeline built by people who may not even know themselves? A culture that rewards speed even when speed leads people straight into lives they secretly want to escape. Your story isn't weak because it took longer to become honest. A slow beginning can still lead to a powerful life. A quiet chapter can still contain the roots of everything that later stands tall. Don't insult your becoming just because it didn't arrive with fireworks. The main character doesn't peak in chapter 1. The main character gets shaped there, tested there, misread there, hidden there. And when the later chapters come, they don't rise because life suddenly becomes easy. They rise because they finally stop abandoning themselves. So keep reading your own story with softer eyes. Keep choosing what's true over what's fast. Keep building the kind of life your soul doesn't have to recover from. Because maybe you weren't behind at all. Maybe you were being prepared for a chapter that needed the whole of you.